Welcome to our channel Inspirational People. Today, we are back with a story of another legend who conquered the world with no weapon but rather, her voice and musical instruments. She was born into music, the daughter of a gospel singer and the goddaughter of the legendary Aretha Franklin. From an early age, it was clear that Whitney Houston was destined for greatness. Her voice, powerful yet graceful, carried a kind of magic that couldn't be taught. By the time she released her debut album, the world knew her name. Whitney didn't just enter the music industry, she redefined it. With every note, every performance, she reminded us what true talent sounds like. But behind the curtain of fame and fortune was a woman facing enormous pressure. The spotlight can be beautiful, but it can also be blinding. As Whitney broke records and collected awards, she was also battling inner demons, struggling with identity, expectations, and the overwhelming weight of being seen as perfect. Still, through it all, she kept singing. Her voice never stopped being a light for millions, even when her own world grew dark. Whitney Houston's story is more than her success, it's about her spirit. It's about rising again and again, even when the world watches your every fall. It's about how one woman, with extraordinary talent and an even bigger heart, changed the music industry forever. This is not just the story of a superstar, it's the story of resilience, love, and legacy. This is the inspirational story of Whitney Houston. Long before the world knew her as The Voice, before the platinum albums and sold-out arenas, Whitney Elizabeth Houston was just a little girl from Newark, New Jersey, a girl with a dream, a gift, and a spirit destined to rise. Born on August 9, 1963, Whitney entered a world already rich with music. Her mother, Cissy Houston, was a renowned gospel and soul singer who had performed with icons like Elvis Presley and Aretha Franklin. Her father, John Russell Houston Jr., worked as an Army serviceman and entertainment executive. From the very beginning, Whitney was surrounded by the rhythms of gospel, the soul of Motown, and the spirit of the church. Music was not just in her environment, it was in her DNA. Her cousins included chart-topping singer Dionne Warwick and opera singer Leontine Price. Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul herself, was a close family friend and became a godmother figure to young Whitney. It was a lineage and a legacy, but also a silent pressure. From an early age, it was clear that she had something special, a voice that could move people in ways most artists only dream of. But what people often forget is that greatness isn't just born, it's nurtured, tested, and sometimes fought for. As a child, Whitney was shy, sensitive, and deeply observant. She watched her mother rehearse tirelessly, lead choirs, and command attention with her presence and voice. Whitney soaked it all in. She began singing at New Hope Baptist Church, the same place where her mother was the musical director. It was there, standing in front of the congregation, that Whitney sang her very first solos. She was just 11 years old, but even then, her voice carried the depth and conviction of someone far beyond her years. The church became her training ground, not just vocally, but spiritually and emotionally. Gospel music wasn't just a genre, it was a way of life. It taught her how to tell stories through song, how to connect with emotion, and how to deliver each note with heart. The people who heard her sing in those early years say it was like hearing something divine. Her voice had purity, power, and purpose. And even as a young girl, Whitney wasn't trying to impress, she was simply expressing the music that lived within her. But Whitney's childhood was not without its challenges. In the late 1960s and early 70s, Newark faced racial tensions and economic hardship. The city was reeling from riots and struggling to rebuild. Her family eventually moved to East Orange, a nearby suburb, in search of a safer environment and better opportunities. Yet even there, Whitney experienced the realities of growing up black in America, moments of discrimination, societal expectations, and the constant push to prove oneself in a world that often didn't expect much from girls like her. At home, her parents maintained structure and discipline. Cissy Houston was particularly strict, especially when it came to music. She didn't want Whitney to rely solely on her natural talent, she insisted that her daughter learn technique, control, and the hard work behind greatness. Cissy didn't praise Whitney lightly. In fact, she was known to be tough in rehearsals, pushing Whitney to do better, be better, and give her all every single time. It wasn't just about singing, it was about honoring the gift. And Whitney listened. She practiced, she learned, and she grew. By the time she was a teenager, her voice was already developing into something extraordinary. Deep down, she knew she was meant to sing. She once said, "God gave me a voice to sing with, and when you have that, what other gimmick do you need?" It was a confidence rooted in faith, the kind only a young girl raised in the church could truly understand. At 14, Whitney began performing with her mother on stage, not as a child novelty, but as a true backup singer. She was learning the ropes of the professional music world long before she ever signed a contract. And she wasn't just watching, she was absorbing everything: stage presence, audience connection, vocal precision, professionalism. This wasn't just a hobby for Whitney. It was preparation for something greater. During her high school years at Mount St. Dominic Academy, a private all-girls Catholic school, Whitney struggled to balance her growing musical career with the pressures of being a teenager. She often felt out of place, too famous for a normal life, but still just a girl searching for identity. She faced teasing and prejudice at times, but also admiration. People could see she was different. And Whitney, always humble, never acted like a star. She just wanted to be herself, but her destiny had already begun to call. By 15, she was recording background vocals for big-name artists like Chaka Khan and Lou Rawls. Producers were starting to take notice. Clive Davis, the legendary music executive behind Arista Records, saw Whitney perform at a nightclub where she was singing with her mother. He was blown away. Her tone, her control, her natural stage charisma, it was undeniable. He signed her almost immediately. But what's remarkable is that all of this happened before Whitney even released a single song of her own. By the time she stepped into the studio to record her debut album, she already had years of real-world training, performance experience, and a deep understanding of her craft. Most artists are discovered and then developed. Whitney was developed before she was discovered. In those early years, they wanted to get it right, to give the world an introduction worthy of her gift. During this time, Whitney remained humble, focused, and hungry. She knew what was coming, but she didn't let ego get in the way. She wasn't chasing fame, she was chasing greatness. Then, in February 1985, Whitney Houston, her self-titled debut album, was released. It wasn't just a success, it was a cultural event. Her voice captivated the world. Songs like Saving All My Love for You, How Will I Know, and Greatest Love of All didn't just climb the charts, they became anthems. Whitney didn't sound like anyone else. She wasn't trying to. She brought something pure, powerful, and unforgettable. The album went on to sell over 25 million copies worldwide. Almost overnight, the shy girl from East Orange had become a global sensation. But Whitney remained grounded. She often credited her upbringing, her mother's discipline, and her faith in God for keeping her centered. In interviews, she spoke with humility and grace. Behind the scenes, she worked harder than anyone, rehearsing, refining, and always striving to be better. As her fame grew, so did the pressure. Critics and fans alike watched her every move. Some questioned her crossover success, accusing her of straying too far from her gospel and R&B roots to appeal to white audiences. It was a painful accusation, one that struck deeply. But Whitney never forgot who she was or where she came from. She was a black woman raised in the church, shaped by soul, and driven by love, and no amount of criticism could erase that truth. Instead of responding with words, Whitney responded with excellence. In 1987, she released her second album, Whitney, which debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, the first female artist to ever achieve that. The album included hits like I Wanna Dance with Somebody, Who Loves Me, Didn't We Almost Have It All, and So Emotional. She wasn't just proving herself, she was making history. Her talent shattered barriers, opened doors, and inspired millions, especially young black girls who saw in Whitney a reflection of what was possible. She didn't just represent success, she represented hope. By the end of the 1980s, Whitney Houston wasn't just a pop star, she was a global icon. She had won countless awards, sold millions of albums, and captivated the hearts of people across every continent. But through it all, she remained the same at her core, a woman led by faith, fueled by passion, and rooted in love. She didn't just rise, she soared. And the world rose with her. Following the massive success of her debut and sophomore albums, Whitney continued to redefine what it meant to be a pop and R&B artist. Her songs didn't just top charts, they changed them. From the mid-1980s through the early 1990s, Whitney Houston was an unstoppable force in music. And at the heart of it all were the songs that made her a legend. Her songs, anthems of love, strength, and emotion. Whitney's catalog reads like a soundtrack of human emotion. With every album, she delivered hit after hit, not just catchy pop songs, but timeless anthems. Saving All My Love for You was her first #1 hit in the US, a sultry, soulful ballad that showed the emotional depth of her voice. How Will I Know gave her youthful energy, matched with a vibrant pop beat, a track that brought her to MTV and introduced her to a younger audience. Greatest Love of All became a defining moment. More than a song, it was a message about self-worth, dignity, and the power of believing in yourself. It became an anthem not just for Whitney, but for millions around the world. Then came I Wanna Dance with Somebody Who Loves Me, a global smash that lit up dance floors and airwaves everywhere. It was joyful, powerful, and deeply human, just like Whitney. Her 1990 album I'm Your Baby Tonight added a new layer, a more mature, rhythm-driven Whitney who could flow through R&B, funk, and even New Jack Swing. Tracks like All the Man That I Need and My Name Is Not Susan showed her range emotionally and musically. In 1992, Whitney made her acting debut in The Bodyguard, starring alongside Kevin Costner. It was a gamble, many questioned if a pop star could lead a major film. But Whitney didn't just rise to the occasion, she owned it. The film was a box office hit, but what truly made history was the soundtrack. The Bodyguard, original soundtrack album, became one of the best-selling soundtracks of all time, and it included the song that would become her signature, I Will Always Love You. Originally written and recorded by Dolly Parton, Whitney transformed the song into something entirely her own. With a simple a cappella opening and a soaring crescendo, she delivered one of the most powerful vocal performances in music history. It topped charts in over 25 countries and became the best-selling single by a female artist of all time. It was more than a song. It was a moment, a declaration, a masterpiece. And it reminded the world why Whitney Houston's voice was unlike anything it had ever heard. Whitney's live performances were legendary not just because of her voice, but because of her presence. She didn't need dancers or pyrotechnics to command a stage. All she needed was a mic and a spotlight. One of her most iconic performances came in 1991, during the Gulf War. Whitney was invited to sing the U.S. national anthem at Super Bowl 25. What followed was a rendition so powerful, so moving, that it brought an entire nation to tears. Her performance of the Star-Spangled Banner was released as a single and became a top 20 hit, something unheard of for a national anthem. She performed around the world, from sold-out arenas in Europe to massive concerts in Asia and Africa. Audiences everywhere were stunned by her control, power, and grace. Her voice never wavered, even under pressure. Whitney didn't just sing, she delivered. Night after night, note after note. She had an ability to make every person in the crowd feel like she was singing just for them. The awards and honors Whitney Houston received throughout her career are almost too many to count, but each one tells a part of her story. She won 6 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year and Record of the Year. She received 2 Emmy Awards, 30 Billboard Music Awards, and 22 American Music Awards, more than any other female artist at the time. Whitney was the first artist in history to have 7 consecutive #1 singles on the Billboard Hot 100, a record that still stands. Her debut album remains one of the best-selling debuts by a female artist, and The Bodyguard soundtrack is one of the best-selling albums of all time, with over 45 million copies sold. In 2009, the Guinness World Records named her the most awarded female artist of all time, with over 400 awards to her name. Whitney Houston didn't just make music, she made history. Her songs were the soundtrack to weddings, heartbreaks, celebrations, and quiet moments of reflection. Her voice could lift you up, bring you to tears, or simply remind you that you're not alone. At the height of her stardom, she wasn't just a pop icon, she was a cultural phenomenon. She broke barriers for Black artists, set new standards for vocal performance, and became a beacon of inspiration for generations to come. Behind the beauty, the brilliance, and the legendary voice, Whitney Houston was a human being, vulnerable, complex, and deeply spiritual. And like so many gifted souls, her light burned brightly, but it also carried the weight of pain. Her journey, filled with triumph and turbulence, led to one of the most heartbreaking moments in music history, the day the voice was silenced. On February 11, 2012, the world stood still. Whitney Houston was found unresponsive in the bathtub of her suite at the Beverly Hilton Hotel in Los Angeles, just hours before she was scheduled to appear at Clive Davis's pre-Grammy party, a gathering she had once owned with her iconic presence. Paramedics arrived swiftly, but it was too late. She was just 48 years old. The news spread like wildfire. Fans, fellow artists, and public figures around the world were devastated. It felt unreal that someone with such a powerful voice, someone who had inspired millions and shaped the sound of generations, was suddenly gone. The official cause of death was ruled as accidental drowning, with heart disease and drug use listed as contributing factors. But Whitney's story did not end in that hotel room. Her legacy was far too grand, her spirit far too powerful, to be reduced to a single moment. What followed was a global outpouring of love, remembrance, and reverence. On February 18, 2012, the world said goodbye. Whitney Houston's funeral was held at her childhood church, New Hope Baptist Church in Newark, New Jersey, the very place where her journey had begun. It was a full-circle moment. The little girl who once stood in the choir as a shy child had returned home, not as a star, but as a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a woman deeply loved by millions. The service was deeply spiritual, moving, and full of music, just as Whitney would have wanted. It wasn't just a funeral. It was a celebration of life, a celebration of a soul who gave the world everything she had. Artists like Alicia Keys, Stevie Wonder, and R. Kelly performed in her honor. Kevin Costner, her bodyguard co-star, delivered a heartfelt eulogy, reminding everyone of the young, nervous girl he met on set, the one who didn't yet know just how great she already was. Clive Davis spoke with emotion, calling Whitney the greatest voice of our time. Cissy Houston, her mother, sat in quiet strength. Her daughter was laid to rest with grace, surrounded by the prayers and voices of those who knew her best. Among the floral arrangements was one simple, powerful phrase spelled in white roses: love. Because that's what Whitney gave, through every note, every performance, every lyric. Tributes poured in across the globe. Candlelight vigils were held in cities around the world. Radio stations played her music non-stop. And perhaps most powerfully, people from every walk of life, mothers, daughters, singers, dreamers, shared stories of how Whitney had touched their lives. Because Whitney Houston wasn't just an entertainer. She was a beacon of what it meant to feel deeply, love fully, and express yourself without fear. Whitney was laid to rest beside her father, John Houston, at Fairview Cemetery in Westfield, New Jersey. But her voice, her music, and her message have never been buried. In fact, they've only grown louder. Though Whitney's earthly journey ended that day in 2012, her spirit lives on in every powerful note she ever sang. Her story, from church choirs to world stages, from dazzling highs to heartbreaking lows, reminds us that even the most extraordinary people can face battles behind closed doors. But even through the struggle, Whitney never lost her light. She gave the world a gift, her voice. And in doing so, she gave millions the courage to find their own. She is remembered not for how she died, but for how she lived. With grace. With greatness. With a voice that the world will never forget. That's the inspirational story of Whitney Houston. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel Inspirational People to help us make more videos like this.